Tonight, Victoria's daily COVID case number climbs to 14,000, but authorities warn the actual figure is much higher.
We would expect there to be far more positive cases out in the community.
And huge demand at vaccination clinics around the country as millions become eligible for a third dose. Also tonight, Scott Boland's extraordinary debut earns him a spot in tomorrow's fourth test in Sydney. And the fight to save the world's rarest marsupial, the Gilbert's potteroo. Good evening, Susie Rains with ABC News. Victoria's daily COVID-19 case numbers have increased dramatically in the past 24 hours, and the state government admits the official figures don't show the full extent of the spread of the Omicron variant. There were just over 14,000 new cases detected yesterday. That's up 63% on the day before. There are now 516 COVID patients, up from 25 from the previous day. 56 of them are in intensive care. And sadly, 2 more Victorians have died. Victoria's testing system is buckling under the huge caseload, with several major pathology companies announcing they're closing dozens of testing sites across the state. Andrea Nierhoff has the latest.
For weeks, Victorians have watched the queues grow, but they're about to get even longer.
There's no doubt that there is additional pressure on our hospital system right now, and indeed on our health system as a whole.
4 major pathology providers have announced they're temporarily closing testing sites to concentrate on processing a backlog in results, indefinitely wiping out 54 of Victoria's 260 testing outlets.
We have so many staff that are either personally affected, had positive results, or are isolating because they're household contacts. That has reduced the staffing capacity as well.
Our testing sites have been under enormous pressure, and today they've snapped.
Some of those who do manage to get a test have been waiting up to 4 days to get their results.
Time is essentially, being taken away because I need to be stuck in a room waiting on a test because our system can't support the amount of demand that it's facing.
All this came on a day when case numbers surged to a new high. Although 14,020 new cases were reported today, the real figure is likely much higher because of the difficulties many people are having in getting a PCR test.
We don't get a very good picture of how many people are testing positive. And then the flow on from that is that it's very hard to plan around what might come next if we don't know what's happening now.
We would expect there to be far more positive cases out in the community.
There have been teething issues too with Victoria's vaccination booking system for 5 to 11-year-olds. An IT issue meant parents who were keen to book in their kids from today couldn't do so. Health officials say they're working on the problem.
We hope to be able to announce in the next day or so when we can open up that system with confidence.
Vaccinations for children start on Monday. Andrea Nierhoff, ABC News, Melbourne.
Vaccination and testing regimes around the country are also struggling. The federal government is urging people to be patient and to persevere when trying to get booster shots or a COVID test. But health authorities expect cases will continue to rise for weeks before plateauing in February. Here's political reporter Melissa Clark.
Booster shots are in demand this summer.
I don't want to get sick, and it's good for everybody.
I was very keen to get my booster as soon as I possibly could.
2.5 million Australians have already got a booster, and now many more are looking for their third dose. Vaccination clinics, pharmacies and GPs are inundated.
I'll just rebook, I'll come back another day. Oh, there's no communication, it's very poorly run.
Supply absolutely isn't a problem. We've got more vaccines than people who are eligible in the country right now.
But there is a distribution problem, matching demand with supply locally, prompting the federal government to ask for forbearance.
Yes, it may take a little bit of patience and perseverance at times, as we've all experienced.
The challenge only grows next week when vaccination for kids aged 5 to 11 begins.
Be agile when you're making your booking, because often vacancies will come up on a day-by-day basis.
The testing system is struggling too. Results for PCR tests are taking days. Rapid antigen tests are hard to find and often come with a hefty price tag.
We're on the case. We are going to be monitoring this very closely.
The TGA had approved rapid antigen tests here, home testing, from the 1st of November. We're now in January and we've had no preparation done.
There was planning done in anticipation of more COVID cases, but it was based on the Delta strain, not Omicron.
The much more highly transmissible nature of Omicron has seen a surge in case numbers well above what had been anticipated under modelling related to Delta.
Not only are there more COVID cases being reported, it's believed undetected infections are rising too.
The data's not entirely telling us what's happening.
Health authorities aren't too concerned about that gap in knowledge, though, as those people are likely to have mild symptoms or none at all. COVID cases will keep rising for weeks.
We will probably continue to see cases increase over the next few weeks, but by February I'd expect that we should see a plateauing and cases starting to come down.
National Cabinet will meet again tomorrow. Minor changes are likely to be made, but the country's political leaders have set their course. They're relying on high vaccination levels to limit the damage a spike in COVID cases can cause to the health system. The surge over the next few weeks will reveal whether they picked the right path. Melissa Clark, ABC News, Canberra.
Well, for much of the world, scenes of strict lockdowns and harsh restrictions are a thing of the past, but not in China. The country remains one of the few places with a COVID-0 policy, and with the Beijing Winter Olympics just 1 month away, no chances are being taken to allow the virus to spread.
2 weeks into another drastic lockdown, case numbers are starting to drop in China. 13 million people in the ancient city of Xi'an are still confined to their homes, not allowed to leave to buy food or supplies. Authorities say they're providing everything needed for free.
We need to coordinate resources and manpower. Only in this way can the people stay at home with peaceful minds.
Residents have been complaining about not getting help and claim busloads of people are being rounded up from housing compounds and forced into quarantine facilities. This woman says she and 80 others in her building were taken from their homes.
We're residents of Tower 4, but when we arrived there was no room here. We've been waiting in the freezing wind for hours.
A video has been widely circulated of a man being beaten by workers enforcing stay-at-home orders when he went to buy steamed buns. China is hoping to eliminate the latest outbreak, sticking with its COVID-0 strategy ahead of the Winter Olympics. The preparations for the Games have been meticulous, right down to a full-blown dress rehearsal of a medal ceremony today. 25,000 overseas visitors are heading to Beijing, a major test of China's border controls.
It is really very difficult for us to prepare the Games in the COVID time.
Like the Tokyo Games, participants in these Olympics will be kept in a bubble well away from the general public. And there's one more problem. With the Games being held in one of the driest parts of China, the snow machines are now working full-time to turn the slopes white before the opening ceremony. Carrington Clark, ABC News.
This weekend's pier-to-pub swim at Lawn has been cancelled. The second year in a row the event has been hit by COVID-19. The ocean swim and the mountain to surf run usually attract tens of thousands of people to the town, but organisers say too many race volunteers have been infected with COVID to stage the events safely. Like last year, racers will be able to participate virtually by swimming or running elsewhere and posting their times online. A 30-year-old Gippsland man who allegedly lit a fire that damaged the front of Old Parliament House in Canberra is back behind bars this evening after being granted bail in the ACT Magistrates Court earlier today. The man appeared in court via video link on charges of arson and damage to Commonwealth property. He was granted bail on condition he not enter the ACT except for court and legal appointments, and that he not return to the suburb of Parkes or the Aboriginal Tent Embassy. Police say he was arrested in Parkes shortly after being bailed. Around a dozen supporters had gathered outside the court. Local Indigenous elders and representatives of the Aboriginal Tent Embassy have previously condemned the actions of the protesters. The man is expected to appear in court again tomorrow. An app developed in Melbourne is helping non-English speaking patients communicate with their doctors, nurses and carers. The developer says the aim is to put patients in control of their own healthcare. Now there are plans to add more languages and provide the tool to aged care homes. Rio Davis has the story.
At this aged care home in Melbourne, nearly half the residents don't speak English as their first language.
The lack of communication means that you can't give optimal care.
An app developed at St Vincent's Hospital is translating conversations between residents and staff, so everyone feels more connected.
They're usually very excited to hear their own language. They want to say something back. What staff are reporting back is that they find their relationship with the patient improves.
It's designed to help patients explain what they need in between serious medical consultations.
The most clinical that it gets would be, are you in pain? Show me where the pain is. If there's real pain, then let's get a real interpreter, let's get a face-to-face interpreter in and health professionals to try and help you.
Previously, staff were using other translation apps but found they weren't always accurate.
We know at this time during the pandemic, we're all more aware than ever of how important it is to be connected.
People can use it in the 12 different languages that we've got, and very soon adding 3 more, that is Somali, Farsi and Dinka, to the list.
This free tool also has the added benefit of keeping residents' minds active.
If you keep the language going, it helps actually in staving off the progress of dementia too.
It's hoped the app will give these residents more control and understanding of their care.
Arrivederci.
Rio Davis, ABC News, Melbourne.
Still to come this hour, more on the battle to get a booster shot.
If I were to contract COVID in the next month before I'm eligible for my booster, I'm at higher risk of complications.
We have record numbers of COVID positive people, so it really is a perfect storm.
Also, when did free medical tests become a bad thing? That's coming up.
A previously confidential settlement between Jeffrey Epstein and a woman who's accused Prince Andrew of sexual assault has been released. The document reveals Virginia Giuffre received hundreds of thousands of dollars as part of the agreement, but whether it prevents her from suing Prince Andrew is still being contested. Here's North America correspondent Jade McMillan.
When Virginia Giuffre reached a settlement with Jeffrey Epstein in 2009, it was sealed and kept private. But as Prince Andrew defends his own civil case, the contents have now been released.
It's certainly an interesting agreement, and there's some questions that are left open by it.
Virginia Giuffre reached the agreement with Epstein after accusing him of sexually assaulting her and flying her around the world for sexual encounters with other men. She's now suing Prince Andrew on allegations the royal sexually assaulted her when she was 17. The Duke of York strenuously denies the accusations and is seeking to have the case dismissed, arguing the previous settlement with Epstein shields him from legal action. Documents released by a New York court, signed by both Ms. Giuffre and Epstein, show she received $500,000 as part of the settlement and agreed to restrictions preventing her from suing other potential defendants.
It creates a dispute. Giuffre will argue that the release does not apply to Prince Andrew, and Andrew will argue that the language is broad enough to cover him.
The case could boil down to the fact that Prince Andrew is not named specifically. The release does not mention Prince Andrew, Ms. Giuffre's lawyer said in a statement. He did not even know about it. Both sides of this case are expected to be heard tomorrow when a judge in New York considers Prince Andrew's motion to dismiss Ms. Giuffre's lawsuit. If the case is not thrown out, it could go to trial later this year.
This is one of the most bizarre pieces of a settlement agreement I have ever seen. Anyone who has wronged Virginia, who was associated with Epstein, is now released from liability. I mean, that would fly in the face of what our laws are now trying to do.
Either way, the royal family will be watching closely. Jade McMillan, ABC News.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has ruled out any new restrictions as COVID infections surge. Mr Johnson says a third dose of the vaccine is key to combating the Omicron variant, with data showing the majority of people in intensive care had not received a booster. The government introduced its Plan B last month, which included wearing face masks indoors. It's resisted calls for more restrictions as new infections rise to more than 150,000 a day.
The pressures on the NHS in the next couple of weeks and maybe longer. Looking at the numbers of people who are going to be going into hospital, it would be absolute folly to say that this thing is all over now.
At least 60% of people aged 12 and over have had a booster in the UK. The French Parliament has suspended debate on legislation that would ban unvaccinated people from much of public life. French MPs say they've received death threats as they debate new laws mandating the COVID pass. It would require people to show proof of vaccination to access public venues and transport. France's infections have been soaring, with new cases topping more than 200,000 per day. The country has one of the highest COVID vaccination rates in the EU, with at least 91% of adults double jabbed. Former tech billionaire and founder of Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, has been found guilty of fraud and conspiracy by a US jury. Ms Holmes was convicted of defrauding 3 investors, including media tycoon Rupert Murdoch. She'd repeatedly claimed Theranos machines could detect hundreds of diseases with a few drops of blood from a finger prick. Her company raised more than $1.3 billion before being exposed by the Wall Street Journal and a regulatory audit 5 years ago. Superannuation funds and other big institutional investors are increasingly taking companies to task over a broad range of issues, from chief executive pay to climate change. The people who advise these super funds, known as proxy advisors, are now under review. The federal government says funds rely on proxy advice to make decisions on behalf of millions of Australians who've invested in listed companies through super. But the government could face a political hurdle in passing any changes, as Nassim Kadem reports.
Big super fund investors are calling for change in corporate Australia with the help of what's known as proxy advisors.
Proxy advisors give advice to big investors, big superannuation funds particularly, about issues such as how to vote on CEO pay at AGMs, about the re-election of directors.
Superannuation funds now own about 20% of the Australian Stock Exchange. That makes up shareholdings worth more than $500 billion on behalf of their members. When deciding whether to support the re-election of a company director, they may take advice from these proxy advisors. There are 4 main players in Australia. In December, the Treasurer stripped proxy advisors of their financial services licence. The government is calling for greater transparency.
We've seen the scale of superannuation investment in Australian listed companies grow significantly over the years, and that means they now carry much greater weight, and so the advice they receive is crucial that it be accurate and appropriately tested.
But the government faces a political battle, with independents and Labor saying they'll fight the proposed regulations when Parliament resumes.
It's disgraceful that the Treasurer has lodged this regulation between sitting periods in order to usurp the oversight role of the Parliament.
And this has got the look and feel of Josh Frydenberg just doing the bidding of his corporate mates. This is no basis on which to be making public policy.
To get their licence back, the proxy advisors will need to meet certain conditions. One being that they must email a copy of the proxy report to the company involved on the same day they give the investor that advice. If they don't, the advising firm could be fined more than $11 million per offence, and the individual advisor more than $1 million.
This is an unprecedented intervention in the market.
Proxy advisors now have until February 7 to apply for a new licence. Nassim Kadem, ABC News.
To finance now, and the local market has seen a strong start to 2022 with the biggest one-day gain in a year and a half. Here's Elise Morgan.
New year, new records. The first day of trade for the year and the All Ords hit a fresh high and notched up its biggest one-day gain since July 2020. Nearly every sector up. Energy was the standout though after Indonesia banned thermal coal exports, which sent our local miners soaring. And lithium stocks are charging into the new year. The buoyant local trade followed a positive night just about everywhere. The Australian dollar also higher after a rally in commodities. Now to the national obsession, house prices. They rose another 1% in December, according to CoreLogic, bringing the annual increase to a staggering 22%, the strongest year since 1988. Hobart gold, Brisbane silver, Sydney the bronze. Sydney's median price rose by $360,000 in the year, or call it $1,000 a day. As you can see here, price growth in cities is starting to slow, while regional markets saw renewed growth into December. But with the price of holiday rentals as they were, it might have made more sense to buy. A shortage of listings persisted last year, which added to price pressures. Clearly, many thought the midst of a pandemic was not a good time to sell, but fortune favours the brave. Those that did sell were handsomely rewarded. Listings are starting to pick up though, so analysts expect house price growth to continue this year, but not be as hot. Commonwealth Bank, for example, expecting home prices to grow by around 7%. Now, being the first Tuesday of the month, it would normally be when the RBA meets, but they take January off. So here's a refresher on where rates are headed here and overseas. That's finance.
Australia has confirmed its team for the fourth test, starting at the SCG tomorrow, with Scott Boland and Usman Khawaja both in the lineup. With the Ashes already in the bag, the test might be a dead rubber, but there's still plenty to play for.
Man of the moment, Scott Boland has been rewarded for his unbelievable 6-wicket haul in Melbourne.
Boland's got 6 at the G!
Keeping his spot for the Sydney Ashes test.
He's bowling as well as he ever has. It's great that he can just keep going from last week and have another crack here. I doubt it's going to be 6 for 7.
Josh Hazlewood won't feature in Australia's three-pronged pace attack. He and Jai Richardson remain sidelined with injury.
We gave Joshy every chance we could. Just felt like he couldn't quite bowl at full tilt yesterday.
The skipper's hoping veteran Usman Khawaja will be at his best, coming into bat at number 5 in place of Travis Head, who has coronavirus. Khawaja hasn't played in the Test team since August 2019.
He's a seasoned pro. You know he's going to walk in and you know what you're going to get from him. He's a class player. He knows his game really well.
There's been a shake-up amid England's ranks. Ollie Robertson and Chris Wokes will miss out, while seniors Ben Stokes and Stuart Broad come in with a point to prove.
I hope I've got a couple of caged tigers coming into this match, Ben being one of them and Stuart Broad.
Having been thrashed 3-0 in the series, the visitors are trying to stay positive.
You can get knocked down sometimes in life, you know, you do have to get back up. There is no hiding place.
England and Australia will be competing not only against each other but the weather. Rain's forecast throughout the 5 days of play, which could dampen Australia's hopes of claiming a series whitewash before heading to Hobart. Chloe Hart, ABC News, Sydney.
AFLW organisers are confident they've got the protocols in place to deal with COVID when the season kicks off on Friday night. The league has outlined its contingency plans to ensure the women's competition progresses through to a premiership.
A gruelling pre-season now behind them, the reigning premiers are again ready to roar.
Everybody's come back bigger, better, stronger than last season and hungrier than ever.
But with the now familiar threat of COVID looming large, just getting the AFLW's 6th season underway is a challenge in itself.
We're prepared. We have been scenario planning for quite some time.
Organisers are determined to not let COVID derail the competition like it did in 2020, but accept there will be disruption. Contingencies include being flexible if matches need to be rescheduled and having extra players on standby.
We have 420 AFLW players, but there's a further 140 train-on players across the nation that have been training with the AFLW club.
Several Collingwood players are currently in isolation, while 5 Gold Coast Suns players who tested positive are expected to be cleared and ready for their Sunday clash against the Giants in Mackay.
Understanding the world we live in and things can move and shape very quickly, but you know we're hoping that
the girls will train tonight.
Many players in the Women's League have to work or study, an extra hurdle in trying to stay COVID-free.
We do have careers outside of football and probably don't have the opportunity to bunker down in team bubble scenarios as easily as what a professional athlete or a professional team may have.
If you've got to spend more time in the community, then you're going to increase your risk. And if you've got to work, then you've got to spend more time in the communities.
Clubs from WA are preparing to spend 3 weeks on the road.
We're really looking forward to that part of it, getting away, being professional athletes for that time, even though we know there's going to be some challenges in keeping ourselves and the community safe at those times.
The season is due to get underway when St Kilda take on Richmond on Friday night. Ashley Stevenson, ABC News.
Few places are more isolated than the islands off Western Australia's south coast. Many, like Middle Island, east of Esperance, are difficult to access and almost never get visitors. And that's why they're being used as a safe haven for one of Australia's most endangered animals.
These rangers are on a mission to protect the world's rarest marsupial. The Gilbert's potteroo is a small relative of the kangaroo and is critically endangered, with only about 100 left in existence. That's why a small population on Middle Island is being closely monitored.
We just put 5 potteroos out here before, and yeah, we're just seeing if the population can grow, because they're like on the mainland, they're getting eaten by foxes and wild cats and all that there.
It's tough work. After making a 2.5-hour water crossing, the rangers spent almost 6 hours hiking to different locations to download images from motion sensor cameras.
What we do is we come out every 3 to 6 months to come out, change over the batteries, change the SD cards, and to rebait the rebating station that we've got for the potteroos, just to attract them to the cameras to see how they're doing.
Middle Island is a relatively new home for the Gilbert's potteroo. The species was believed extinct until it was spotted for the first time in more than a century near Albany in 1994. Some of those animals were relocated to Bald Island off Albany.
Unfortunately, the original population, which was numbered about 20 to 30, was made extinct by a huge fire at Two People's Bay. Immediately after that, the funding was granted to establish another population as a sort of replacement, and animals were released on Middle Island.
The evidence shows the potteroos are breeding on Middle Island, but it's not clear whether their numbers will continue to grow.
Potteroos live for about 10 years, so there's plenty of time for that little population to build up.
A long-term mission to save an animal at the edge of extinction. Emily Smith, ABC News, Middle Island.
To the weather now. Temperatures for the state were near average except in the southwest, where they were 5 degrees below average. It was dry and sunny across northern Victoria, but cloudy in the south. There were isolated showers about elevated parts of the south and isolated thunderstorms over the northeast ranges in the afternoon. The highest temperature of 35 degrees was recorded at Yarrawonga and Rutherglen. In Melbourne today, it reached 22.4 degrees just after 4 o'clock this afternoon. In the city now, it's 22. Across the country, there were showers for Sydney, Brisbane and Hobart, thunderstorms in Darwin and mostly sunny in Adelaide and Perth. The satellite image shows cloud and isolated thunderstorm over the tropical north and central WA. There's low cloud over the east coast and Tasmania. A trough over eastern Victoria will deepen and move west in the coming days. A high will continue to move east across the Tasman on Thursday. There will be showers and storms for WA, the top end, far north Queensland and southeastern Australia. It'll be sunny in Perth, but there'll be showers around for the rest of the capital cities and a possible storm in Darwin. Back home, there'll be a high fire danger in the northwest with a dry and mostly sunny day. Warm in the north with light to moderate east and northeasterly winds tending southerly in the west. Scattered showers will develop elsewhere, more widespread about central areas and western Gippsland, with locally heavy falls, isolated thunderstorms increasing during the afternoon and evening, becoming locally severe. On the bays, winds will be east to southeasterly, 15 to 25 knots, reaching 30 knots in the evening. Waves to 1.5 metres. There's a gale warning for the West Coast, Central Coast and Central Gippsland Coast, and a strong wind warning for the Bays, the Gippsland Lakes and the East Gippsland Coast. For Melbourne tomorrow, we'll have showers and storms with possible heavy falls, an overnight low of 18 before a top tomorrow of 26 degrees. Looking ahead now, Thursday showers and a possible storm. Friday humid with showers and a top of 27. More showers and cooler on Saturday and partly cloudy for the start of next week. That's it for this evening's bulletin. Laura Tingle is up next with 7:30. Good night.